Welcome, everyone. You are at the first day of our 2-day brief Future Ready GC event, virtual event, which includes this part one, which is reshaping legal to meet 2024 demands. And part two session is tomorrow at the same time as today on what traits do CEOs value most in their legal leaders. That will be moderated by Erin McNulty with a different panel, and look forward to that session also tomorrow, which all of us, I think, will be joining. I'm pleased to introduce to you our panelists, Anya Lyons, who was last week Deputy General Counsel of VMware, which is now part of Broadcom. So Anya Lyons is the Deputy General Counsel and SVP of that organization, and I expect known to many of you, very well known in the legal operations and overall legal department management arena. Matt Fawcett, Chief Strategy Officer formerly and Chief Legal Officer formerly of NetApp, and on Global Counsel Leaders Advisory Board, and Varun Mehta, last but definitely not least, the CEO of Factor, which is our exclusive partner for Global Counsel Leaders. I'm the founder and executive director of Global Counsel Leaders, founded in 2010. Really happy to be with you to share some points. And we're going to jump right into this. So get your polling questions ready. We want for you all to be involved. Share your comments in the chat or questions. We will share those chat comments with all of you. So I'm going to start by, now that they've been introduced, what we're going to talk about today is really reshaping legal to meet 2024 demands. And you all know that those demands are changing rapidly and constantly and going in every direction. So it's necessary now to truly reshape. The three things we told you that we talk about in our promotions were discussing takeaways from our new survey of 50 global corporate legal chiefs, then share some insights from our panel on how the GC and her team must lead to meet constant new and shifting demands, and 3, recommend approaches to overcome barriers to some of the advancements, tech-driven, AI, et cetera, that you all want to proceed with. So we first wanted to give our panelists a sense of who is here today. And so the first poll question, we'll flash this up on the screen and you'll have an opportunity to respond. I won't vote and our panelists won't vote, as you see here. And by the way, this is a recorded session. What best describes your current role? You can pick the top corporate legal person in your organization, someone who reports to the general counsel or CLO, in-house counsel, provider of services, or other. Can we show the responses to that question in just a minute? And also, in adding, as you answer that question, I'd like to, and you can answer the second one at the same time. In what country or region are you located? I've been through the registration list, so I know, but many of you don't know here. And I think it's middle of the night for some of you. So we'll hope to do our best to keep you busy in Thailand and Australia. Australia, maybe not, Singapore, some other Asia Pac countries, Middle East, just getting a little late in the day. The other is the final question there. Do we have some answers? Here we go. So 42% are the senior leader. We have lots of Global Counsel Leaders members on at this meeting today. I'm really happy to see it. It's a little bit different than our usual roundtables, virtual roundtables, because we have 25 or 30 that will be joining. Definitely there are more than 50 registrants, but many people get called away. That's one of the challenges that you face. In-house counsel, providers of services, there you go. And in what country? Scrolling down there to see 90% from the US. Ashley, do you have the ability to scroll there to the responses for country or region? I think we're sorting that out. I wonder if I can. Here we go. 10% from Europe. So the people from the other places, I guess, are going to watch the recording. So a very American focused group. I think many of you are in global organizations. And so one of the things we want to do today, I'm going to close this for now, is talk about the differences between the respondents in the poll between Europe and the US. Oh, I just heard from you that you all can scroll yourselves when we share these poll questions. So the next thing we're going to do, and you'll hear from the panelists a bit, and then we'll take the screen. I'm going to run through a few slides, but is to share with you the 3 big takeaways from the survey report that we concluded from really analyzing all of the different responses. And this is a survey that we have done since this was the 6th biennial, as you see, and they are all leaders in global organizations. So either the general counsel or the deputy in those organizations. Some of you that are on this call have taken the survey. It is completely anonymous. So, but we ask individuals if they want to share their name so that we can make sure they have the survey results. And I'll be sending you all a copy of the full survey later. The question we're going to ask you is in relation to the first takeaway, which is general counsel are devoting far more time to strategy related to the business and diverse risks related to the business strategy. And findings are suggested, and that's a good thing. We do think that's a really good thing. And findings suggest that there's less time spent on clear goals and strategy. No need to change the slide yet. We're going to just share the poll question for you on that takeaway, that GCs are devoting far more time to strategy and a bit more for the business, across the business, and a little less time on clear goals and strategy for the legal function. So what's your view on that first takeaway? Do you strongly agree? Can you bring the poll question up? I think that's Ashley. There we go. And you all can scroll up and down on the side as you answer. Do you strongly agree? Are you neutral? It's really useful to the panelists to know how you feel about these things, because we'll try to either support how you feel or try to talk you out of that perspective. The second takeaway, since that's on here as well, is workload pressures on the general counsel and team are constant and growing since more than 6 years, as are budget pressures, even more this year than before, with an impact on morale and retention. And few general counsel are prioritizing advancing with technology to gain efficiencies that could ease these pressures. So what do you think about that? Do you strongly agree, neutral? Can I scroll down to the responses, or do they come up? When you're ready, you can show those responses to the first. We'll show the first one, and then we'll look at that first, and then the second one. Okay, agree, 75%, strongly agree. Nobody disagrees. Wow. Not a very disruptive group so far. I hope that changes. But okay, so then on the second point, workload pressures on the GCN team are constant and growing, as are budget pressures, with an impact on morale and retention. Few GCs prioritize advancing with technology to gain efficiency. So we'll get to that in a moment, if any of you haven't responded. Anya, what do you think of the first take? Oh, I'm sorry, that one's for Matt. Matt, what do you think of that about more time on strategy?
Well, I think it's exciting. As you mentioned, Lee, while most of my career has been as a general counsel, I did pivot into the chief strategy officer role at my last company and ran strategy and corporate development for the company for a good amount of time. And frankly, I think it's exciting and I think it's right. I think that GCs have a lot of value to bring to the overall strategy of the company. And we actually spent a good amount of time back at NetApp thinking about why is that, right? What is it about kind of the nature of a GC that translates into the work of a strategy role. And I think there is a lot of harmony. You know, both of those roles require a certain level of objectivity and independence to render the best opinions. They're often about forming opinions based on uncertain fact scenarios. There's a certain amount of intellectual rigor that I think is common among both of those roles. You know, I think by their nature, lawyers and strategy people are curious and ask a lot of questions, and that's really good for both of those roles. And you know, the other kind of obvious one is that people who are in those roles tend to have, you know, advanced degrees, right? So they've got, you know, years of education kind of living in these kinds of questions.
Mm,
The second part of this, Lee, is a bit concerning to me. And I know we'll come back to that later in the discussion, but I do find the idea that there's more time in strategy of the company wonderful, but less time articulating goals and strategy for the department quite troublesome. And so
right.
hold that thought and we'll come back to it.
Right. And it's not that everyone is doing that, but certainly we found lots of, we'll be sharing with you why we think that. So on the second takeaway, if you can share the responses to that before we scroll down to the third one, that would be helpful. And I'll ask Anya to comment on the workload pressure. So this idea that it's just constant and growing, and we've been saying that for the last 6 years. We stopped asking 2 years ago whether your team's workloads were increasing because 100% of 73 respondents said yes. So we thought, well, we're not asking anymore because it just keeps going up. We shouldn't be going to the yeah, just want to show the responses to the second question if you can. There we go. Strongly agree. Okay, that's someone where everyone agrees, and that few GCs are really prioritizing advancing with tech. That's great to see. I will get to the third takeaway in a moment. Actually, I'm looking at the findings for the second one, for the first one. Can you move down to number 2? Oh, I can do that. Sorry. Sorry, you guys. I'm not being very agile with the tech. Everybody's pretty much in agreement. So there we go. So, Anya, anything to add to that comment? Workload pressures, or do you want to wait to get into it later? Whatever you choose.
Yeah, just no surprise. I think it also comes back to Matt's point about strategy. If you think about what CEOs are thinking about, they're thinking about how to unlock the AI wave to have more value for their company. They're thinking about operational rigor. Every company at the moment, look at the economy. They're thinking about China strategy. They're thinking about cyber still, all the new AI privacy regulations. What are the supply chain impacts if we think of what's happening politically around the world? So there's going to be more and more appetite for, like Matt said, you know, legal folks who have a really good judgment, business acumen, who are practical, who can help the business find solutions. And that just means more and more work, which comes back around to, you know, this challenge of more and more work. It's our addiction to firefighting is our problem. We're addicted to feeling needed and firefighting for our own functions as opposed to being strategic. So I think that's the conversation we'll jump into. How do we shift our mindsets as legal leaders into the more strategic and up the value chain, because that's where they want us to play. It's just we're still holding on desperately to that addiction that we have, that we've got to somehow let go of.
Yeah, great point. So the third point, third big takeaway is most GCs are unsatisfied with their department's progress to improve productivity to meet new and changing demands. And you'll see later that people give themselves continuously. We've asked this question through 3 of the last benchmarks, really low scores. Not typical for people who are lawyers to give themselves failing grades. So it's been a consistent surprise to me. But I understand, given all that's happening, and appreciate Matt's comment here in the chat. So this point Most GCs are unsatisfied with their department's progress to improve productivity to meet new and changing demands, and the forms of progress that they describe in the survey, which is qualitative, not quantitative, just 50 respondents, are really elementary steps we found when we've talked about this before. So as far, can you raise the poll again, and we'll ask you on this takeaway, do you strongly agree or agree? Are you neutral? What's your view on that? That most are satisfied and that we're at pretty elementary steps right now. Some of you may have scrolled down and answered that already, so we'll just go to the responses. Thank you to our backstage crew. Let's see, so.
Strongly agree.
Oh, quite a bit of difference. Neutral. And Varun, what do you think about
Well, I
that?
think we should have. I think we shouldn't have neutral, because I think neutral is a cop out of an answer. Look, I can say after spending most of my time talking to general counsels or deputy general counsels at companies across the globe, most are unsatisfied with progress. And I think you have to think about it in terms of kind of three. I'd kind of summarize in three ways. So the first I'd say is, do you have vision? Do you have a vision for your legal department? That's usually the first question I ask each general counsel. And most people go, what does that mean? I'm like, no, you have to have a vision for like what is the role of your legal department in your organization? I think another general counsel leader member, John Blood, general CLO at AB InBev, I really liked his vision, and his mission is to be building the most impactful beer focused legal machine in the world. Right? That makes sense. AB InBev is the largest beer producer. He's like, no one's going to know more about beer than us, but people may know more about employment in certain markets, regulatory issues in certain markets. So as a general counsel, I think setting the vision for what is the role of your department in both protecting and enabling the company that you're trying to build, that you're part of, is super key. The second I would say is capability, right? So I could, I'm very blessed. I have a 7-month-old son. I could tell him I want him to become an expert in AI, but he does not have the capability yet. Okay, everyone doesn't. At the highest end, I'm an engineer, but I don't think I'd be a great actual lawyer. I think we need to map people's strengths and weaknesses, and then where we can enable their capability by giving them tools and operations. I love that there's this huge drive towards building legal operations and COOs of legal and things like that. That's really important. But I want to tell every general counsel on this call, that's not enough. Those folks are the starting point, but each department leader in your organization needs to think about things operationally. We wouldn't go to any other part of the business and say, hey, you only have to think about the FP&A. Don't worry about how it runs or what data happens or the tools you use by which. Operations needs to be core to everything you deliver. The head of legal operations should be the capability that's helping to drive that, build strategy around that, and enable that in an effective way. And then I think the last is capacity. I think going back to the workload pressure point, Lee, I think lawyers are, those that have worked in outside counsel, my observation, are used to working never-ending hours, taking more on, and not always prioritizing what's the most important. And outside counsel, that makes sense because the client's paying you and asking you to do it, so you should do it. But in-house, you really need to map out what is the most important work that will help drive my business forward and execute the vision that we laid out earlier. Am I the right person to do it? And then I think the last part is, do I have the capacity to deliver this work? And I think a lot of general counsels do, because they're always forced to deal with more for less, are setting out an ambitious transformation agendas or change agendas, but they're not investing in the resources. They're not asking for budget to make those change. They're not
Right.
building a business case of why this is important or impactful. And so that's kind of, vision,
that's really-
capability, and capacity is kind of how I'd say are critical towards really improving and making the changes you want to.
Yeah. And one of the things we talked about this in detail in a live in-person forum in London in October. And people that we know well, Bjarne Tellman, Reena Sengupta, were on that panel. And one of the things that they were surprised at was that only 13% of respondents are getting external help. They're doing all of their building and driving internally, which is very hard with some lifts like this that aren't generally in the typical legal department's wheelhouse. Definitely legal operations has that, but not others. So I'm going to just go, if you can go to the next slide here, that would be really helpful. I'm going to just share quickly, run through the background, and then we'll ask 3 questions that our panelists will focus on. So on the first point, where did we get that response? Well, first we looked at what are the top, how the 50 GCs responded to the question about what are your 2 top legal and regulatory challenges. And the top ones are cyber and data privacy, ESG responsibilities, and increasing complexity of transactional work. The 4th one on the list, which is close behind really, is supporting the CEO and taking major position on major ethical issues, issues at hand for the company. And all of those 4 things require some real strategic support. So you can imagine how the legal leader is playing a role with multidisciplinary groups on cyber and increasing complexity of transactions, on ESG, how we approach it, how we judge the data, and certainly on supporting the CEO. And then on your right, you see how we asked people what they thought their team's top expectations of them were. And here, strategy is a distant second to the first, which is proactive commercial legal advice. And that kind of advice today by people anywhere that are giving counsel to the business requires some strategic thinking, because you have to look beyond what the business question is to the outside world, what's happening, socioeconomic issues, that kind of thing. You see the rest of the points on here: stabilize or reduce costs, identify and manage risk, and compliance. So, and then another slide. So this, for us, supported that idea. To the next slide. We won't comment on these as we go, but get into them later. So the next slide. I don't think I can push it. No, there we go. So adding to that is that GCs consider their strengths that are most valued by key stakeholders as very strategic things. So even though strategic thinking is 5th on here, and 3% difference in a qualitative survey doesn't mean much, it's so it's right behind trusted advisor. A trusted advisor is strategic. They know the company very well. They know its plumbing. And so that's another area where strategy comes up, the ability to spot risk as well. We talk about horizon scanning all the time. How often do you hear that? And that is really a strategic role for spotting risk. And then it's good to see, and a lot of us saw a lot of positive in building and motivating a high quality team as a big part of it. So those 3 things pointed to that takeaway. Going on, the next slide. There are just a few more of these, folks. It's taking a little time to shift them. Fraser, next slide. There we go. Most general counsel are unsatisfied with their department's progress to improve productivity to meet demands, which we said. And the forms of progress they describe are mostly elementary steps. So you see here in this, the best ways they're handling resource demands. They're all about shifting things that lawyers may have done, or people in the legal or compliance areas. They're about shifting them to other parts of the organization. That's really pretty basic initial steps. Very valuable in many cases, but it is not necessarily involving advancing with technology or really making the steps that could, with automation, that could really support the overload that your team faces. And opportunities to improve operations and efficiency and performance are also, we see that there's some challenges with gaining budget for tech-enabled operational and process improvements. It's pretty low on the list. So is getting the expertise and also measuring and presenting the benefits. General counsel seem to have a hard time telling the story and making their case for the kind of tech and automation and now AI, generative AI advancements that you all will need to make, including building the skills of your teams. Then the next point related to that is that, oh, can you scroll back a bit? I think we missed the second one. No, we did cover it on the 6th, but I don't see. Go back one again. There's I don't think we showed this about the workload pressures. The top operational goal for 2024, one of the reasons why we concluded that there's not as much focus on legal goals and strategy is that we got responses all over the place. So this was an open-ended question. And the highest response was lower costs and increased efficiency. Well, what does that really mean? I mean, we've been talking about that since 2000 almost, I feel like. So it was odd. There was five respondents out of 50 said something about AI, but the rest were all over the map. There was no way to categorize them. Also, the G satisfaction, as you see here, is 44% of people gave themselves a 1 or a 2 on their satisfaction with their progress in digital and tech out of 5. So 1 was low, 5 was high, 44%. And 3, the big number, which stayed exactly the same as 2 years ago, was in the middle level. But more general counsel are now saying they're low. Top demands on legal leaders. You see it all here. There's the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th on this bar chart are really all the same. Ongoing budget pressures, greater operational knowledge is required, as Anya was just referring to, and being overworked, setting limits around availability and capacity, and then being hit all the time by constantly growing and changing demands. So that sort of rounds out that second thing. So you all are all seeing what you see your fellow general counsel responding to. The final slide, if you skip ahead to 8, I just wanted to point out how you can see the very wide variations we saw. And again, this is qualitative. But if you work in a global company and you're setting strategy and goals, it's so important that your people, wherever they are, understand the logic. Because you'll see the yellow bars, respondents based in North America, the blue, respondents based in the UK and the EU, facing very different challenges as far as they judge them. And, huge differences. You see this one on the far right and the one on the far left, really very different. So to go, we'll go back to take down the PowerPoint and get on with the panel discussion. I'm going to ask you all the first question, which is based on the findings of the survey, which you all have looked at and what you see from your in-house colleagues and in your own departments, no holding back. What's the most important piece of advice you would give to corporate legal leaders in this session? Varun's given us a bit. Who wants to go first on that one? Anya, I see you get ready.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think it's a combination of what Matt and Varun were saying at a high level, but just to think about how much time you're spending on the future and actually write it down. Think about in your week, in your months, what is your future proofing plan? What is your strategy for the next 3 years? Because everyone in the business will also be asking you. And start putting on a hat that's like, what would the CMO do, the the marketing officer? What would the CFO be doing? Because we somehow manage to still think that legal can operate without a strategy. And the reality is you can't. You're going to get blindsided, especially now with AI, where every CEO is seeing that, oh, marketing, it can be completely transformed. And wow, Goldman Sachs are putting legal up there. Legal work can now be done by Gen AI, which there is some work that will absolutely be completely transformed by that technology, but there's other work that will not. It's just our value chain we will go up the value chain. But if you don't have a response, that's a problem. If you take the chief marketing officer, they go into a meeting at the start of any year with their vision, their strategy, their budget ask, and they align it to what that's going to do to further the objectives of the business. So I would say, do the same. Copy those other colleagues that you have who are other business leaders and operate like them and partner with them. I mean, we wanted a cookie management system, and it was our CMO that we partnered with and did a presentation on getting the budget. We wanted to transform contracting. It was the head of sales operations and the head of deal management that we partnered with to say, how could we have an enterprise impact together on speed, on revenue, velocity, on things that the CEO cares about. Going it alone in a silo without a vision is where we're all going to get blindsided. So I think it's learning from those other enterprise business partners that you have, learning how they do it, and don't be afraid to show the gaps. I used to be terrified of having slides that didn't have just all green on them. Now I just embrace the red, which is here's where legal has gaps in risk, and the company has risks that we need to think about other ways to solve, including budget. I mean, no CFO worries about going in and saying, hey, we need money for financial control gaps. But in legal, somehow we're not able to articulate what we need and how to make that relevant to the business. So I think just almost pretend like you're a chief marketing officer right now and start having a strategy and an ask and relate it to the business goals and the business opportunities and risks, but how are you going to help solve those risks, I think.
Yeah.
So I would just start there, maybe become a CMO.
Yes, and there's a few good takeaways there for you all. Matt,
Anya, you brought me back talking about the slide. We used to call those watermelon slides, where it's all green on the outside, but they're really masking the red. And frankly, any legal department that goes in with a deck that's all green, you're going to lose your credibility pretty quickly with your business partners. And I had mentioned in the prior comment the first finding about the lack of clear goals and strategy for a legal team. I think it's really troubling, and I want to back into that. I'm not surprised though, and in fact, earlier this week I was in front of a couple dozen general counsel in the Southeast region, and I think only 3 of them said that they actually sit down and write annual goals and benchmarks and KPIs. And I asked, and it blew me away, but the answers were a lot of the things that Anya was mentioning. It's like, we're too busy to do that. Or, we try to stay nimble so we can adjust to the needs of the business. But I would suggest to everyone here that if you're not clear about what's most important, right, to use Varun's words, like what's the most important work, you will inevitably get sucked into all the work, right? So if you're worried about getting overworked, your solution to me is to be very clear about what you're going to do, and also equally clear about what you're not going to do based on the budget and the resources you have. And in my time, I spent a lot of time both trying to articulate our goals, but also articulate, hey, this year, this is not our priority. So one example would be for many years, we said, our priority is not going to build a separate government relations team. We're going to draft off of the work of other companies who are like-minded, because that's not core to us. Or we are going to prioritize deals in North America, UK, Germany, and France, and deprioritize deals in Argentina and Chile, because we're going to have to build infrastructure to support them, and we don't have the bandwidth to do that. So I think it's important, and even if you do it just as a thought exercise for yourself and your team, to sit down and say, what's most important, and by extension, what's not most important, and how do we manage our resources to go at the most important things. So to me, that would be the biggest takeaway. And again, I'm not surprised, but a little bit sad that those are the results right now. And I want to encourage everyone just to go for it, because I think it'll be liberating.
Yeah, and I think it's great for the GC to have a script, as you were saying, like even if you do it for yourself, it's hard sometimes when you're going from strategy, when you're spending so much time with the business, which is really important and valuable and gives the legal department more height in the organization. It's still, your people need to be sort of script to remember things that they remember about, like, what are our 3 goals? What are the 5 things we're trying to do? And just keep repeating those things. So Varun, I think you commented some on this topic, so I'll come back to you on the next one. Is that okay? Or do you want to
Yeah,
add?
of course. No,
Okay.
please.
So the next big question for you all is, what stands out to you as significant? What else stands out to you as significant from the findings report? And what do you see as necessary actions for in-house leaders? So we're hoping you all will have some takeaways here and write down 3 or 4, because you'll probably forget them within a half an hour of when you leave this call. So do write them down and maybe email them to yourself. But what do you see as necessary actions for in-house leaders based on the findings, really? Varun, we'll start with you on that one?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see the word a lot and I hear the words a lot is, and I'm going to kind of both say something, and I'm going to actually use it as a way to get a question in for Anya and Matt, which is this idea of being a strategic partner, right? And I think the words don't have a very good definition, right? So I'm going to tee it up for Matt and Anya, but I'm going to say something and just tee it up, which is, what does it mean to be a strategic partner? And the reason why I lay that out is because I believe if you take a very simple version of what we've been saying earlier, what Matt and Anya and I kind of mentioned earlier, which is, hey, you need to have a plan. like even if I think I said vision, maybe that's even too ambitious. Just start with a plan for the next 12 months. What do you want to accomplish? What's important? What's not important? Mapping that to your strategic partners plan is really important. Then you're not going to have as much of the changing needs. Now, of course, there's always changing needs of something regulatory. The world happens, but that impacts everybody, not just legal. So, guys, Anya and Matt, how do you think about building a strategic partnership? It can't just be house of yes, right? How do you build the right productive relationship with the business? Because I know everyone wants to do that, but I think that's an art, not just a science.
So thanks for pivoting, Varun. You've given us a big one to deal with. I'm not ducking the question, but I just want to add one thing, because when I took on the strategy role at my last company, one of the things we wanted to do is actually do the exact same thing. What is our remit and what is not our remit? And the way I backed into that discussion was the following. There were 20 people on my strategy team. In my company, there were over 200 people who had strategy in their official business title. So it kind of can mean anything or nothing, right? Depending on how you think about it. And so I think you need to unpack, forget about just saying we're being strategic or we're not being strategic. I don't know what that means. We wanted to unpack it and say, back to your point of what's most important, when we defined our 3 core principles for what our team was going to do, we aligned on 3 things. One is we're going to try to help the business go faster and make things easier, because we figured if we can take, and looking at, those little micro things that happen a million times a year. So if we can make a transaction go from 2 days to 1 day, and we're doing 10,000 of those transactions a year, boy, we've done something to accelerate the business. The second was, we said we're in a unique position in the legal department where, frankly, if I call anyone in the company on the phone, they're going to pick up, whether they're scared or angry or whatever. But we have this kind of unique ability to see up, down, and across all the spans and layers of the company. And so we thought we could be a really good point for organizing these silos that tend to accrete as bureaucracies grow. So how do we help kind of bust silos and help the company see where there are friction points across those silos? And then the third was really a mindset one, which might sound trite, but we said, look, we're all in sales in this company.
Yeah.
And whether you're a commercial lawyer or you're an employment lawyer or you're an IP lawyer or your support staff, whatever, in our department, we are going to optimize the commercial transactions for the company to help the 5,000 person go-to-market team be successful.
Yeah.
And once we did those three things, a lot of other stuff falls away. And I, to me, Varun, that's the idea of what it means to be a strategic partner. How are we going to help you?
I love that. For the two big takeaways I'd say there's defining the word strategic and partner in your business context. What does it mean for your law department to be strategic for the business and that business unit specifically? And then what does it mean to be a partner? And I do think the last thing you said, and this is something I say over and over again, so if I've said it before to anyone here on this call, I'm sorry. But my favorite story is, I'm sure it's a parable, but like when you ask the janitor at NASA, what is your job? What do you do? And he says, I send people to the moon, right? And that's the level of mission that you have to inspire within your team, within your department, because your job is to help that business, help the company accomplish its mission, both as an enabler, which is often what we talk about, but partnership isn't just enabling. Partnership's also, me saying, hey, Matt, I don't think this is a good idea because of these three risk issues. Or if we do it, here's a way we can mitigate those risk issues. It may mean we need another 3 months. And that's good partnership, right? Being realistic and pragmatic.
That's great. Anya.
Yeah. And I just would add to that, I wholeheartedly agree with all of those comments. And I think, for us, it was scale, simplify, speed, because that was, also where our company had become so complicated. We'd done so many acquisitions. It was just layers and layers of complexity. And Matt's point around, we do have this unique view in legal. And so we see things that other functions are doing. We see shadow operations, we see silos. And even, one example on the privacy front, we saw that, 97% of our deals had privacy blockers. So, I was given the remit of taking over privacy and thinking, how would we rebrand how we do and recalibrate risk? And I think being a really good business partner is also being able to strategically know enough about the business to know where your real risks are, to calibrate those quickly and make decisions, help the business make decisions by giving them levels of risk and what the consequences are. And those are business sometimes consequences, and some of them are legal consequences that are a hard no. But there's other ways that those can be done. And I think a lot of GCs still in CLOs are, I think, I didn't see it in this report, but it is something I hear a lot. Their teams being able to calibrate risk is really important for simplifying what we do, making us help the business to go faster and scale. So that idea of bringing people together around a very inspirational mission, and then it's clarity, communication, and connection, clarity on what you're going to do, and communicating over and over again, not just within legal, but across the company. And that does take time. And I do realize that that's one of the things people grapple with. But if you don't spend the time up front, you're never going to have the time. So it is, we used to call it the power of the pause, blocking out time where if you on your own as a leader feel like you don't have the bandwidth or your head's not in the right space, bring in some of your top talent or bring in an external vendor if you can have the budget to help you with the mission and the strategy. There's lots of talent at different layers in the organization that have ideas that you don't own all the ideas. And I think that's empowering other people to help you build that mission. They'll have more connection to it if you do that.
Right. you know, both of you, and I really appreciate that question, Varun. It raises a lot of things and helps specify. With the technology piece, what we find is so many organizations are trying to tackle it, but because the GCs are being pulled every which way on other projects happening in the company because the world is an unstable place, and that's what's happening to, you know, to the CEO is what's happening. I don't know if any of you saw the Economist cover back in the summertime where it was about the CEO being stretched to the limit, was like a big rubber toy. And I thought, well, when the CEO is stretched, the CLO will be stretched as well. So to have the sort of automation support and those sorts of things, both of your departments have been known for being really technology advanced on using technology and using automation. Just a quick update on what you thought your first 2 or 3 steps were to really get there. And I think it ties to what you talked about before, but.
Yeah, I'll chime in and you know, Lee, your comment, if the CEO is stretched, the CLO is going to be stretched. We used to call that, you know, crap flows downhill, right? And so I think for us, where there were a couple of elements of the technology journey that were both lessons that were sometimes learned the tough way, but important lessons. And I would phrase them in a couple ways. One is, be careful not to try to use a technology solution to solve a people or process problem, because any technology implementation, in my experience, it's going to immediately make you less efficient, right? And it's going to take time to absorb. So you have to have patience, but you also have to be really clear, what problem are you trying to solve, right? There's not just a off-the-shelf tool that's going to universally on day one make you that much more efficient. The second point I would make is that you know, in addition to preparing to be less efficient, you also have to be prepared to fail, because, you know, there are going to be implementations that you learn, these just don't work. I mean, we tried, or are inefficient. We tried, I had the great and simultaneously horrible idea of using a chatbot so that our customers, our internal clients, could go to that chatbot and get, you know, either directions to the right person on the team or simple forms to use. And it took a lot of time to put it in, and nobody used it. And in fact, the rest of the department didn't like it either, because they felt that was losing their connectivity and their relationship with their internal customers. So it was an interesting idea that was a fail, but the ones that were really successful are the ones where we started small and we took small problems and then we built on that. So going back to those little things that you do over and over, for us, bringing in automated workflow technology. So in the most abstract way, if there are times where you find yourself emailing spreadsheets to 25 different people for approvals, if you can automate that, that's a really simple solution. It's more auditable, it is more durable, and it is way faster. And after we did our first 1 or 2 and did proof of concept with those, before long, we were implementing hundreds of them in the company, not just on our team, but in IT and in finance and in HR. And so, you know, start small, find little problems to solve, and those will quickly show you there are lots of opportunities. And then that gives you that kind of flywheel effect where you can also try things knowing that they might fail, and if they fail, so be it. That's the nature of using technology, and you have to get comfortable with that.
Excellent advice. I really appreciate that, and I'm sure others in this meeting do. And I'll ask you, Varun, first, Anya, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many different experiences. We've implemented a lot of technology, certainly lots of failures and definitely some successes, thankfully, as well. But I think don't get distracted by the bright, shiny object, which is technology, and focus on should we be doing this work at all? Because if you're going to automate it, it's a lot of effort and budget, and there is many low-level pieces of work that if you look at it, a business function may be better doing it. The risk profile of your company may have changed. You couldn't even be touching it at all. It's something that you might have no legal touch. That was one of the things we thought about, was what can we also not touch anymore, but have a way that it still gets done, but it's just not done by legal team members who are more expensive than many resources across the company. I would say process simplification and recalibrating your risk on every piece of work you do is the most important work, because if you're trying to automate a complicated process, that is a recipe for failure, unfortunately. And it's the hard work that no one wants to do, but it is the work that will ultimately make you really successful. We had a contract management project, and it was really making our contract much simpler. It took a lot of time and effort to recalibrate risk because people had a fixed mindset that it was good enough, but our CEO didn't agree with us and many of our customers. And so calling your own baby ugly is hard, but sometimes you have to do that. And we really just took out so many things that we would rubber stamp and give away in negotiations. We just rewrote it in a simple way. And then we really just completely rethought how we interacted with customers, and we wanted to create a fast lane for a link to those terms in our POs. And if they placed a PO, then they had accepted the terms. So we took some risk there for certain categories of customer, and then others, and that was sort of our fast lane. And then for others, it was like, how do we create smoother, faster negotiations? And so relooking and retraining everybody around that. But it was the automation of that was the most impactful. But that really benefited more our deal management team than it did legal. But we led it and partnered with them because we wanted to have the enterprise impact, which ultimately took so much work off our plates because those orders were cleaner. They didn't have legal terms in them. Many of them were no legal touch whatsoever. And that really simplified our customer experience. If we had said, we want to do a better contract and we want just a contract management system for legal to make life easier for legal, that is not compelling. No. Because nobody really cares in the business if legal have an easy way to find their documents or it's easier for them to redline. And when you understand that is not ever going to get you the large dollars that you need, whereas if it's an enterprise program around lead to cash and the entire life cycle of how you do business with your customers, suddenly your CIO has budget. Your change management team at the company will help you. All of the enterprise infrastructure that helps large scale projects are there for you, that they will not be in a single silo, sort of very bespoke legal tool for legal folks only. So I just think broaden your mindset on technology. AI is a great example. That AI, private AI, there is so much money and budget around companies now for AI. Latch onto it and be opportunistic, because then you'll get your legal data included in those AI data pools. And that's what you really want for your people. And educate your people around the future, make them feel like they're going to be relevant, not just this year, but in 5 years' time in an industry that's changing.
Absolutely. And this is really such valuable advice. And we are seeing many of you are fighting for talent in your organizations. And we are seeing that in-house counsel between the ages of 25 and 40 or so are looking for tech savvy legal departments because they want to be a part of that change and want to work on valuable work rather than be stuck in the old style model. So we've got just a few minutes left. Varun, would you like to wrap it up and also share your own views, give your tips? Because Factor is serving so many of the large global companies that have come to you for this kind of support.
I don't think I could have said it better than Matt or Anya on a lot of these topics. Look, I think as an organization, what I kind of always emphasize general counsels to think about is like the health and impact of the individual lawyers you bring on, right? So at a core, most lawyers go out from outside in-house to become more impactful, to be part of something, right? And to be able to do more than just what they were already doing at outside counsel, right? And that's a big driver for why people go in-house. I think Thomson Reuters had a study which was like something like 74% of in-house lawyers are unhappy or dealing with mental health issues, and I think a lot of that comes down to a lack of alignment and focus on what's important, which we've been talking a lot about. I think I can't agree more with Anya. What Anya said is like, whenever people say, "Well, isn't it cool that two AIs can negotiate contracts amongst another?" I'm like, well, what's the point of doing it at all? Like, why is a human doing it at all? You clearly don't value this. It's not that the technology is making it better. It's that you could have put rules in to make this simpler. How do we use this moment of AI? How do we use this moment of where the relationship between employer and employee is changing, where work from home is changing, where it feels for so many people, not just in the legal department, but across the globe, that there's just so much happening and it's taking up our mental headspace. How do we create how do we create an environment in our legal departments that that folks, like you said, 25 to 40 and older and younger possibly, are excited to come onto this journey to make change happen, to drive value, to drive impact. And I think that if we start with the humans, if we start with the people first mentality, if we say, hey, like, what will make and drive, I think there's a funny article that I wrote earlier this year or last year, which is what I learned from a grocery store, Wegmans, my hometown Wegmans, Rochester, New York, familiar with it. What they always focused on was, how do we make 16-year-old kids working in our grocery store super happy? That'll translate into customer service. And that has, and that's, I'm still talking about it 30 years later, right? So I think your people will surprise you in innovation, will surprise you in process, surprise you in drive. Give them the vision, give them the capability, give them the capacity, and give them something to be excited about. So that's what I'd say. I think it's easier said. It's easier said than done. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's where our role as leaders really drives it.
Takes a lot of time. And to add to that, and thank you all that have joined in this conversation to listen and to take away ideas, and to Anya, Matt, and Varun for their sharing their fantastic experiences. Come together regularly with people on conversations like this, because lots of people will give you other ideas and you kind of get in your own sort of world if you don't do that. Matt and Anya, I know, are amazing networkers. Varun's talking to general counsel every day, and as I do as well. And a last minute pitch before you all leave, we are starting our campaign for individual members for Global Counsel leaders, and you'll all be receiving letters that are on this call. So I hope some of you consider it. We do programs like this year round. Tomorrow, again, what does the GC look for today in the general counsel? That will be an interesting discussion too. So thanks you all. I hope you all took some things away. Don't forget, send yourself an email with a few of the takeaways you heard that stood out to you. All right.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks everyone for joining.
You all.